How many of these things did they have?
They had nine craft altogether. I only got hands-on with one of them, so I can't really say what how the others.
I wonder if he would have had to seen all 9 craft unless it was in a briefing. But I wonder if one of those craft were the like pill shaped, right? The Tic Tac, very similar to the USS Nimitz and Commander Fravor that they saw in San Diego. Anywho, be curious to see. We got a lot of questions here. Let's see if we get some answers.
Operated.
Did you see the other ones?
Yeah. At one time, and only one time, the bay doors that between the hangars were all open, and I could see all the way through.
And were they all exactly the same?
No, they were all different.
Different shapes?
Yeah.
But they were all from somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to Supernatural Saturdays here on the Bald Brad channel, where we take one day out of the week to step aside from the politics, the craziness of the world, and dive into the paranormal, the unexplained, and the supernatural. What we're going to be looking at today is Bob Lazar giving his story about working on alien spacecraft, seeing aliens, and all the stuff that surrounds it. We've talked about doing this for quite some time, and what I'm thinking about doing here is chopping this up into maybe 4 or 5 parts because it's a long podcast. It's about 2 hours long of him talking about his story and his experiences. But if you guys really like this first part, then we'll make part 2, 3, and 4, and we can watch it all together in the live chat, live stream, in the comment section, and have a lot of fun with this. So as always, support the show by hitting that like and subscribe button, leaving us a short, sweet comment down below. Again, if you want to see different parts of this, meaning a part 2, 3, and 4, let me know, and I'll make it. But if we don't want to see a continuation of this, I got to know as well, so we don't waste everybody's time here, because I love doing it, but I need you to love it as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
Relax. Bob, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I understand that you've told this story many, many times. You've been grilled many, many times, and it's very stressful for you, so I really, really appreciate your time. For people who don't know the story, there is a documentary. Jeremy Corbell has a documentary out right now. It's called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and UFOs.
And Flying Saucers.
And Flying Saucers.
Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I first heard your story decades ago. I told you last night when we went out to dinner. I've seen pretty much every interview you've ever given. I've followed the story incredibly closely. Mm-hmm. But for people who don't know the story, let's give them the bullet points. You used to work at Area 51. And Area 51, you went like, huh?
Well, we want to be accurate.
Okay.
Area S4.
S4, okay.
It's about 15 miles south of Area 51.
Okay.
But,
you worked in, how would you describe it?
I guess within the Area 51 compound. You can call that a subset of Area 51.
And you got that job. Before that, you were working...
Before that, I had worked at Los Alamos
right.
National Labs in New Mexico.
And you were involved in what kind of work there?
Nuclear weapon development, physics. I mean, they do everything there.
So how do they approach you to say, hey, Bob, why don't you come on out to the Nevada desert?
Well, the way this went down was, at that time, it was 1982, I put... a jet engine in my Honda. And Los Alamos put it on the front page of the paper. It said, Los Alamos man, physicist at the lab, built this 200-mile-an-hour, Honda jet.
The dude put a jet engine in his Honda. I mean, that is really cool. I mean, a 200-mile-an-hour jet engine in your freaking Honda, and you get on the freaking front page of the newspaper. I don't know. I mean, at least it's something to track back, right? Just another credence to the story that if there is proof that he actually was in a newspaper, which it was proof because I've seen Jeremy Corbell's film, everybody's going to know this guy in the local area.
Car that I drove to work every day. So I was known in Los Alamos, the guy with the weird car, and you could hear it from a mile away. Anyway, the day that came out on the front page of the paper was the day Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, was giving a lecture down there at the lab. And we didn't have much going on that day in our group, and I asked if I could go down there. And I went down there early, and Ed Teller was outside, leaning on a brick wall there and reading the front page of the paper. Now, this is a guy out of history, so I introduced myself. Hey, I'm the guy you're reading about there. And we talked for a little while, and it was cool. Fast forward to years later, I had moved out to Las Vegas and had, left Los Alamos and, went on to other things. And I wanted to get back into the scientific community. I left to start other businesses and that sort of thing. So I sent resumes out, and one of them went out to Ed Teller and referenced our meeting, back in the day. And anyway, he remembered me. And
some people might go, why would a guy remember a random conversation of a random guy walking up to him saying, hey, I put a jet engine in my Honda, and that's what you're reading about? Well, yeah. I mean, how many people do you know put a jet engine in a freaking Honda, and you're reading about it in the newspaper, and the same day that the newspaper comes out, it's front headline news, and the guy that put the jet engine in his Honda is walking up to you going, hey, I'm the guy that made it. And then you're having a conversation, probably something you're going to remember. You know what I mean? It's like a guy that flew over some area with a jetpack, and you're reading about it in the newspaper, and the guy's like, hey, I'm that guy in the jetpack. Let's talk about it. And you have an actual conversation about something of interest. You'd probably remember that. Like if you met a celebrity, I'm sure you remember meeting the celebrity and every engagement that happened with it. And if that celebrity wrote to you, you'd be like, I remember that. That's awesome. Same thing happened here.
Gave me a reference, somebody to contact at EG&G. And that's pretty much how it started.
So you get a phone call or a letter? Like, what do you get?
Well, I got what did I get? I got a letter initially and went down for an interview probably a couple times. And it was down at EG&G Special Projects, which was at McCarran Airport at that time out in Las Vegas.
And did they give you any sort of job description of what you were applying for?
They said it was for I can't remember exactly what they did. This was a long time ago, but I think it was advanced propulsion or something like that. Something relatively generic. And they said it's in a remote area. It's going to be some days on, some days off. And, it was kind of it was kind of not exactly a full-time job, but you might have to be out there for 2 weeks at a time and take 2 weeks off. So it was kind of the work schedule would be kind of broken up.
And did this seem attractive to you, or did it seem weird?
No, it really wasn't weird, because people that work at the test site, anybody that's familiar with the area up there, working at the nuclear test site or at the Tonopah test range north of there, that's typically how things go.
So you had known about it from the scientific community? Because Area 51 at that time was
No, they didn't say
still
anything about Area
classified.
51.
Okay, so they
just said it was in a remote location, and you just know it was up at the test site.
Right.
So, but there was no mention of Area 51 at that time.
So they've done hundreds of nuclear tests in Nevada. That whole area there's giant chunks of Nevada that people.
Yeah, there's a big piece of Nevada, and it's split up into different areas. There's a nuclear test site. There's Area 51. There's the Tonopah test range north of that. There's little sub areas. There's areas where they test chemical weapons and things like that. So it's all broken up as a gigantic test area.
So take me back to first day on the job. You accept a job. They take you out there.
Yeah, it's the first day, really, I didn't really get to see a whole lot. The first day was essentially just paperwork. That's when I flew into Area 51 proper. And I left McCarran Airport and flew what they call the Janet flights. Just, a passenger plane from Las Vegas to Area 51. And it was really just going through a mountain of paperwork that day, from security clearances to... God, it was like 2 or 3 hours of just solid paperwork, and that was really an uneventful first day.
When did things get weird? When did you realize? Like, at what point in time did you say, "Hey, this is not normal work. Like, this doesn't even seem like it's from this planet"?
That I can't tell you what day that occurred on because so much time has gone by. The days have kind of fused into one, and I can't separate the days.
Was it a slow burn, or was there a moment of recognition?
Well, the first inkling I had was when I came in. There's this facility that is at a.
It would be hilarious if he's like, yeah, it was the moment when an alien walked in the room and was like, hey, what's up, Bob? We've known about you. Beep, bop, boop, boop, beep, beep, beep. You know what I mean? Just some alien creature walking in. You're going, holy crap, what the hell? Obviously, I doubt that happened, but it would have been a cool story.
S4. It's in the side of a mountain. And normally we had pulled in with the bus and gone around the front through a normal double door. This time that I went in, there were hangar doors open. I went in through the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on. I saw it sitting there, and we walked by it. It had a little American flag stuck on the side, and I thought, oh my God, this finally explains all the flying saucer stories. This is just an advanced fighter, and this is fucking hilarious.
Right.
So I went by.
I might have the same reaction too, right? I mean, if it's the 80s, I understand there was Roswell and there was all these stories that have accumulated probably for 40, 50 years prior. But, if you're somebody that works in propulsion and energy, you might have that same thinking going, oh, this is just one of our craft. It's just a top secret technology system that we've created and we're trying to keep it away from our enemies. It has an American flag on the side of it. You might have that same thinking as Bob Lazar here, and I might even have the same thinking. Hell, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be like, holy crap, aliens are real. I would have been like, oh, this was just our stuff, and we thought it was aliens this entire time, and it wasn't.
I slid my hand alongside it. I got reprimanded immediately for touching the thing. And there was a guy, an armed guard, that followed us in and just said, keep your eyes forward and your hands at your side and just walk in the door. So that was the first time I had seen anything that was weird. It was some time later that I was introduced to my my lab partner, Barry, and we had some of the subcomponents of the craft in the lab, and Barry was very anxious to get a new lab partner, so he was very talkative and couldn't wait to show me different things. And it was in the demonstration of the reactor working where it caught my attention to where this is technology that doesn't even exist. So, I mean, that was the first time I knew that this is really something different.
What was it? What was it? What was it about this reactor that made you think that it didn't exist technologically?
Well, it was I actually have to back up because there were some briefings that I read before that certainly gave me the impression that this was going to be a weird job, but this was the first hands-on thing. This was a small reactor about the size of a hemisphere, about the size of a basketball, on a metal plate, and when it was running, it produced a gravitational field of its own. Now, this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity.
I've heard of others talking about this before as well, and I've heard that the amount of energy that needs to be produced to create something like this, to create a gravitational field, is astronomical, that you almost can't quantify it in your head and actually make sense of it. So I'm going to be curious here if he actually brings any of that up, because I've heard that through various films, and not like Hollywood films, but films similar to Jeremy Corbell's. I've also heard it on Ancient Aliens, just reading about it as well. So I'm very curious, as a guy that deals with energy, that has dealt with nuclear reactions and facilities like he's talked about at Los Alamos. I'd be curious if he actually mentioned that in this podcast.
The only way we get gravity is from large quantities of mass. But there's no machine we can have that turns on that makes gravity. Like, you can turn on an electromagnet and it makes a magnetic field. We can't make a gravitational field. Anyway, this device was producing that. And Barry said, almost like he was bragging, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like two like poles of a magnet. So that was...
so like when you take two magnets and you're trying to press them together and they push against each other?
Yeah, that kind of cushion feeling, but you can't get them together. The closer you put them, the more they push. But
and you felt that physically
with
your
my hand? Yeah, now there's nothing that does that. And that immediately caught my attention, going, wow, this is something else.
What was your thought? Like when you felt that and you knew that there was nothing that you were aware of that could produce
Then
this?
that connected me to the briefings that I read on the first day at S4 was that.
That's kind of a thing that I am really curious about. I understand the days for him are melted because this happened, like 40 something years ago, or just 40 or a little bit less than that. But if he walked in and he saw the saucer and he goes, oh, this is just our technology, it's not really aliens, this is just something that we've had, wouldn't you have had initially the same thinking when a scientist, or in other words, Barry, showing you this gravitational reactor and you're putting your hands up on it going, how? Wouldn't you think first, like, whoa, how did we create this? Because that line of thinking would be linear, right? That you're first thinking it's all our technology. Then you have the reactor. I can understand you thinking, well, we don't have anything like this on the outside. How did we create this? When did we create it? You would think that kind of be brought up here. I'm not trying to just necessarily poke holes in his story, because I would like to think that what he's saying is true. I'm just wondering why that thinking wouldn't be there if it was there initially when he saw the craft.
Everything that I had read was apparently accurate.
What were you reading?
I read, it was kind of an overview. This project was to back engineer the alien craft. And specifically, it was to try and back engineer and see if we can duplicate the technology with available materials. Now, to do this, they split the project into many different pieces for several reasons. They do this on all classified projects, so nobody has the complete story, but they compartmentalize everything. Now, we had the power and propulsion system. So what the briefings they gave me were like a 1 or 2 page overview of some of the other projects that were going on, on the craft. The only reason they do that is just in case what you're working on is connected intimately in some way that we don't know of to one of the other projects. You have to know their, their existence. So, again, they have everything from metallurgy to, weapon potential of the craft. And these were all, essentially very short briefings. But mine was just power and propulsion. And it made it very clear that what I read was accurate.
So when you were reading that, before you actually saw the reactor, what were your thoughts on what they were describing? If you knew that something like that didn't exist, and they're describing it in the briefings, what did you think you were going to see?
I didn't know at the time. I mean, I was reading, I thought, is this some kind of test?
See if you're crazy?
Well, not to see if I'm crazy, to, a lot of times they'll take in real high security jobs. I mean, they'll intentionally insert nonsense into them, whether it's to confuse the fact or if for someone was to leak it out, they would carry that information along and know where it came from. So I read through the documents, but, I didn't know if this was, part of some kind of test or,
Right.
Or what, or was it potentially realistic? I mean, I really didn't consider it being all that possible as far as being the actual thing that I was going to work on at the time.
How did they turn it on?
The reactor?
Yeah.
The reactor can be turned on or turned off in a lot of different ways. The way Barry showed me it, the hemisphere is removed. There's a small tower in the middle. When you put the hemisphere on, the reactor activates. The reactor shuts down. It's load sensing. So if there's no load on the reactor at all, it shuts down. When there's a load present on it, it starts up again.
Load meaning?
You can consider it an electrical load. So although it doesn't necessarily operate electrically, there's no wiring that connects any of the subcomponents together whatsoever. They just have to be in the immediate vicinity. The stuff is borderline magic, and that's essentially where we left it. When
I've heard this from a lot of UFO stories, films, again, even abduction stories describing craft where there's no wires, there's nothing of the sort. It's just everything's almost just Wi-Fi enabled. Like if we were to make a comparison to what we have today, and that's kind of giving credence to his story of going, nothing's connected. It's just somehow creating power with each other and connected in some way, shape, or form with electricity, but there's no electrical wires connected. So it's hard for us to even fathom. And the way I kind of equate it to, if we were to take, I don't know, an airplane, like let's say a Boeing 757 and landing it in Egypt, back thousands of years ago, they're going to be going, what the heck is this? I've never seen this before. So I would imagine it's probably a very similar situation to Bob Lazar here, where you have this advanced technology that's so far beyond what we've ever even seen or can comprehend cognitively that we don't know what the hell to do with it. We're trying to back engineer something that we've never even seen. We don't even know how to remotely even understand this technology in the same way the Egyptians would look at a 757 going, I don't even know where to start. What the hell are these wires? Just cutting stuff up, right? Doing stupid stuff with it. So I could totally see something very similar happening here in real life in Area S4 or Area 51.
When I left the project.
So there was no progress made.
There was some progress. I mean, we did identify, at least we think, some processes and had a rough idea, we think, of what was going on. But I think this is a problem that they've had for a long time. And, I was replacing somebody that Barry worked with prior to me. And I think there was some horrific accident that I didn't have a whole lot of information on, but, Barry alluded to that.
A horrific accident, like where someone died, or?
Yeah, where somebody died.
Because they were trying to tamper with things or figure out how something worked?
Yeah, the reactor in particular.
But yet he let you touch it.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to do was cut into one.
Oh,
now,
Jesus.
they had more than one there, and that was supposedly there was an unannounced nuclear test, and that's what it was. At the time, remember, they were still doing underground nuclear tests at the test site. But from what I understand, according to Barry, there was an attempt made. Now, this must have been a pretty desperate attempt because it's not a very scientific process to analyze something that way. But it looked like they used a plasma cutter or something like that to cut into an operating reactor.
How many of these things did they have?
They had nine craft altogether. I only got hands-on with one of them, so I can't really say how the others.
I wonder if he would have had to seen all 9 craft unless it was in a briefing, but I wonder if one of those craft were the pill shaped, right? The Tic Tac, very similar to the USS Nimitz and Commander Fravor that they saw in San Diego, with the Tic Tac going from 80,000+ feet down to sea level. I say 80,000 plus because the altimeter is what it's called or something like that measures altitude, only starts at basically 80,000. So a lot of people think it actually was in space and it dropped to sea level in a second. But we only have 80,000 to basically a foot above sea level of data showing that Tic Tac. So I'm curious if there was a Tic Tac shape or they were all different in shape inside the hangar. And this is from the 80s, so this is well before the Tic Tac. I think the Nimitz thing happened, 2001, 2004, or something like that. Maybe 2014. There's a 4 coming up in my head. But anywho, be curious to see. We got a lot of questions here. Let's see if we get some answers.
Operated.
Did you see the other ones?
Yeah. At one time, and only one time, the bay doors that between the hangars were all open, and I could see all the way through.
And were they all exactly the same?
No, they were all different.
Different shapes?
Yeah.
But they were all from somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, did anyone make any attempt to explain or to tell you where they came from?
No. No one is the least bit interested in letting everybody know all the facts. They want to give you the minimum information that's necessary to complete your task. So you're not getting the story of where they came from. You're not getting the story of how much progress other people are making. You just focus on the small component.
But they gave you some indication that they've been working on these for a while?
Yeah.
When do you think they acquired these?
I really couldn't say. I think they've been around for a while.
So they bring you into this room. You see this reactor working. You realize this is nothing that, as far as the scientific community at current time, has the ability to create.
We still don't.
What is your life like from that moment on? Is that where everything changes? Because I would imagine the moment you actually make contact with something that's extraterrestrial, whether it's an object or a being, something where you can actually absolutely be certain it's not from here, your whole paradigm, the whole world you live in, is now a different place.
Well, this is the only
Question for all of you, and please let me know in the comment section. If you were in this guy's situation, you saw alien spacecraft, you didn't just see one, but you saw 9, you're seeing this reactor that has a gravitational propulsion that you know that doesn't exist in human existence. You probably, I'd imagine, have seen aliens. I don't know yet. We haven't got that far. We're only 17 minutes in, roughly. This thing is a banger of an episode here. We're finding out a lot of stuff about UFOs, alien spacecraft, the technology, what the U.S. has. What would that do to you? I mean, you gotta be messed up some way, right? I mean, you gotta start questioning kind of almost your faith, religion in some way, shape, or form. Just questioning government and what you know and don't know. What else is being hidden from you? I mean, this dude, you go down such a rabbit hole, this could really mess you up. How would you be messed up? Let me know in the comment section.
only time it became exciting. You know, the rest of the time, it was really an ominous feeling being at work. But at that time, it was exciting. I mean, now I knew we were on the absolute beyond the cutting edge of science. And I was so absolutely excited to be there every single time I was. You know, this was a fantastic opportunity. And however, in short order, it began to concern me. We really have no idea what we're talking about. And the excitement kind of turned to dread at some point, because the amount of power we're dealing with is astronomical. I mean, to affect gravity, to produce the effects like this equipment does, takes huge amounts of power. And I've given the...
That's exactly what we talked about when he brought up the idea of the hand going on the reactor, and what other people have said about the amount of energy you would need to produce something like this. So it's just giving credence to a story.
Example before of, you know, taking a small portable nuclear reactor and, you know, putting it back into Victorian times, you know, with the scientists of the time, and just dropping it in a room, and they come and look at it and see that it's producing power and wonder how it...
That's like my Boeing 757 example. Giving it to the Egyptians. They ain't no gonna know what the hell to do with it. Hey, you know, sometimes you give yourself a pat on the back with a solid analogy. He's doing the same thing here.
Work, so they start taking it apart. And as soon as they get some of the shielding off, the people are going to drop dead because of the radiation inside. Now, the people have no idea that radiation even exists back then. But anybody that comes in to check on them will also drop dead. And, you know, there's no reason that exact scenario couldn't happen with what we're dealing with. We have no idea how the physics operate within this thing. The power levels are, like I said, astronomical. Like, it's incredibly dangerous to tinker with something like that. And, you know, in some respects, we were guinea pigs, just try to find out how to make this thing.
So they'd had a series, as far as you surmised, they had a series of different scientists try to back engineer this thing, try to figure out what this thing was, and they would bring in new people and like, let's throw Bob at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And they
I don't know how many, but I knew there was certainly one before me, and I knew he died during the analysis of the reactor itself.
And you don't know how many have worked on it, and no one gave any
This could have been
indication.
there for 50 years. It could have been there for 5 years.
When they're giving
really
you
don't
instructions, what are they saying? Like when they're giving you direction, they're showing you all this stuff. Like what are they saying? What specifically? What are they asking of you?
Well, essentially what they ask is what I said. We are just to gather as much information as possible, find out how it operates, and see if we can duplicate it. So,
But they never told you where it was from. They never let you ask questions about where it's from.
Well, if the information I read in the briefings was accurate, now what I do have to say is the information that pertained directly to the reactor was accurate. What I read did jive with reality.
In terms of how?
In terms of how it was made, what we saw, how it operated, the materials, how it, you know, turned on, and what was discovered about it. I'm sorry. The migraine is really making it hard for me to think here.
Sorry, no, we talked that before the podcast. You tell our buddy Bob was getting a migraine. I know you're very stressed out by this, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate you doing this.
Where was I already?
We were talking about
right,
the way you explained it.
And so there was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. Now, how they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. But it wasn't just from the Zeta Reticuli star system. It was what they called ZR3. So it was a third planet in that star system. So there was no other information about it other than that's supposedly where the craft came from.
How do you guys think they got that information? I mean, what is there just documentation sitting in the craft? I mean, they're not going to write in English, right? I mean, what are the odds of that? Are they talking to an alien? Let me know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the live chat right now or the comment section. I want to know. How do you think they know this?
Now, is that true? I don't know. I have no way of verifying that, but that was printed in the same materials that referenced the reactor. Now, I looked that stuff up when I went home, and Zeta Reticuli is a binary star, two stars that orbit one another, and it's only visible in the southern hemisphere, and it's about 30 some odd light years away. So that's literally all the information I have about that. I don't know how they found out it came from there.
And you also probably have some suspicions that they give you some disinformation like you were talking about before. Where they would, I mean, if you ever decided to talk about this, they added a bunch of nonsense to make whatever is factual look ridiculous.
Right. Or be able to trace it down. Like, hey, this fax came out and, this Lazar guy said it came from Zeta Reticuli, so they knew it would
when
be
you
me.
read Zeta Reticuli, were you like, what in the fuck is this?
Well, reading all of the stuff, it was, what in the fuck is this?
You're like, why did I sign up for this? Like, what?
No, to me, this was cool. This was interesting. I said, I was just excited to be out in a secure area, in the middle of the desert. I said, this is awesome.
How old were you at the time?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, so you're probably totally geeked out.
Oh, yeah.
I can actually see that being true. Even if you're reading something, you're like, this looks like a bunch of BS. You're at a young age. I remember, I'm sure all of you remember in your 20s, and you get an awesome job. I remember doing acting, and I wasn't super stoked about the project itself, but I was on set. I was on backlots. I was, there's crews. I had my own assistant. Like, you don't care what you're doing. You're just stoked to be there. And I remember just walking on set for a television show, and they're like, hey, Brad, you can go home. I'm like, I don't want to go home. I want to see everything. I want to see how every component works here. So I would stay on set literally sometimes 20 hours just to see everything because I was super excited about it. I didn't give a crap what they were filming. I just wanted to be there. So I understand that idea of being young and just totally involved. You don't care what's going on. You just want to be a fly on the wall or be a part of it. And I could just connect with that here.
This was great. I mean, I was excited. So I didn't care. I'm reading through everything. And
so you read through all the Zeta Reticuli thing, but then when you see the actual starship with the little American flag sticker on it.
Well, was
that later or before?
That was before.
So before. So you see the thing before and you say, oh, this is American.
Wait, what's that before?
So many years.
Yeah, I can't.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
The days have fused together. It's so hard to separate what happened in each visit to the place.
Do you remember the thought process when you read that it's from Zeta Reticuli?
Yeah, it didn't hit me like a ton of bricks or anything. It was just like, yeah, okay. And,
you think it was bullshit?
I don't know.
You just were like, okay.
Now I don't. I mean, because when I read it, I hadn't verified anything. And this was just a bunch of stuff I was reading. And I thought maybe after this, they're just going to give me a test and see what I can remember in crazy information. And then it would. But
that's actually a really good point that he's bringing up, because I know at my accounting interviews that lasted 4 or 5 hours, and I would have to listen to a partner, not listen, but we were having a conversation. And one of the testing components, which I didn't know at the time, was that we'd be talking for an hour and a half, and then the goal or the objective was for you to recall certain components of the conversation and connect the dots from the very beginning of the conversation and then somehow transition to what was spoken of in the middle of the conversation at the end of the conversation, because you're going to be going out with clients, CEOs, CFOs, and you need to be approachable as well as have a personality, on top of the fact that you can actually listen to a conversation, engage in that conversation, recall certain information from that conversation to either help the client, to connect the dots for them, to make sense or make meaning of everything. So this is real world, to where some corporations will test you, or some entities will test you on certain components of what you're reading or that conversation. So I 100% actually like that he brought that up, because it's very real world.
Like I said, when I finally went in with Barry and had hands-on experience with what they were talking about, it took on a completely different meaning.
So there's a plate, there's this thing that looks like a half a basketball, and when it's on, you can't come anywhere near it. You can't touch it.
Right.
How is, what is gravity about that? Like the concept of gravity to most people is gravity is bringing something towards it.
Right. Well, I guess you would say it's anti-gravity. Mm-hmm. It's gravity shifted 180 degrees. It's, anti-gravity.
And did they have any understanding about what could possibly create this effect? Did they have any areas where they'd like you to look into?
No, they knew there was a fuel source in it, and they were proficient at making it work. And again, my analogy to something like this is you can drop a motorcycle off in the wagon train days and just leave it with the keys parked outside, somebody's place. Everybody will come around it and they'll poke and prod, and eventually they'll turn the key, get it to start, and become proficient at riding it.
Yeah.
But they won't be able to understand what the hell's going on. They won't be able to make the plastic fender, much less anything else. And I think that's exactly the state we were at. We played around with the parts long enough before I got there where they could make the reactor operate, take the fuel out, and know that it makes it work. How exactly what was going on in the reactor remained a mystery at the time. I think we made some progress on what was going on inside, but I don't think anybody really knew anything. They could just watch what was going on and make note of it.
How long were you there?
Is he implying that we know how to fly these things? Is he implying that they have been flown around? Are we able to engage these weapon systems that are potentially on these craft? How did we find them? How long has he been working at S4? We got a lot of questions here for a part 2, 3, or 4. So let's find out here. If you enjoy this stuff, we will continue here with another episode of Bob Lazar talking about his story of working on alien spacecraft, maybe meeting aliens, seeing aliens. Are we having weapon systems on these craft, shooting at enemies? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, folks. Let me know in the comment section below. As always, support the show by hitting that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you here tomorrow on The Bob Brad Show.